I leaned back in the leather chair, letting my fingertips glide across the polished mahogany desk. Funny thing about this desk, it wasn't even mine, not at first. I used to stand in front of it, clutching folders so tightly my knuckles turned white, praying my boss would acknowledge the work I had poured my heart into. He never did. He just smiled, straightened his tie, and presented my ideas as his own.
Now?
The desk, the chair, the office, every last inch of it belongs to me. The city skyline stretched wide outside my window, skyscrapers glinting in the late afternoon sun. My silk blouse rustled softly as I shifted, reaching for the cup of coffee that had long gone cold. I didn't mind. Cold coffee reminded me of those nights I stayed awake till dawn building the life I have now. Then, my phone buzzed on the desk, screen lighting up with a name I hadn't seen in years, Richard Hale. My chest tightened for just a moment, an old reflex I thought I'd buried. Richard. My former boss. The man who had stolen my credit, my voice, my chance. I let the phone buzz once, twice, 3 times before silence settled again. A smirk tugged at my lips. The irony was almost too perfect. Richard was calling me, in the office that used to be his. The ghosts of the past were knocking, and for the first time, I wasn't the one trembling. I wasn't always this composed, sitting in a high-rise office with my name etched in gold on the glass door. A few years back, I was just Olivia Parker, junior marketing associate at Hale & Company, the kind of woman who lived on vending machine granola bars and carried heels in her tote because the subway ruined my shoes every morning. Back then, I believed hard work spoke for itself. I believed if I stayed late, double-checked every figure, polished every pitch deck until my eyes blurred, someone would notice. And someone did notice, just not in the way I imagined. It was Richard. My boss. I'll never forget that Monday morning. My heart raced as the conference room filled, senior partners taking their seats, the air smelling of leather chairs and burnt coffee. My hands trembled as I clutched the proposal I'd worked on for weeks, my idea, my strategy. Richard stood at the head of the table, flipping through slides. Slides that were mine. Word for word. Brilliant work, Richard, one of the partners said, nodding approvingly. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, as if someone had wrapped a fist around it. I wanted to speak up, to shout, "That's mine. That's my work." But my voice stuck. My fingers dug crescents into my palms under the table. I forced a smile, the kind women are trained to wear even when their hearts are breaking. After the meeting, I confronted him in his office. "Those were my ideas, Richard. You know that." He leaned back in his chair, smirking like it was all a game. "Olivia, you're young. You should be grateful your work even made it to the boardroom. Take it as a compliment." A compliment? The word stung more than the theft. That night, I walked home in the rain without an umbrella, my cheap flats squelching with every step. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed in my tiny apartment, tears blurring the city lights outside my window. I pulled out a letter from my grandmother that I'd kept tucked in my journal. She had written, "When the world silences you, don't beg for a microphone. Build your own stage." I read it again and again until the words settled deep inside me. My chest still ached, but something shifted. I knew I couldn't stay. Not in that office, not under Richard's shadow. The very next morning, I typed up my resignation letter. My hands still shook, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from resolve. I wasn't just walking away from Richard. I was walking toward myself. Starting over felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if a net existed. I left Hale & Company with no safety cushion, no glowing reference, and barely enough savings to cover 3 months of rent on my shoebox apartment in Brooklyn. The first few weeks were brutal. My mornings began with black coffee and job boards. My nights ended with rejection emails. "We've decided to move forward with another candidate." The lines blurred together until they felt tattooed on my skin. But I couldn't go back, not after what Richard had done. So I freelanced. At first, it was tiny projects, designing logos for mom-and-pop shops, writing copy for realtors, creating social media campaigns that paid just enough to keep my lights on. I worked at my wobbly kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of thrift store notebooks and a secondhand laptop that overheated every time I opened Photoshop. There were nights when doubt crept in, whispering, "What if Richard was right? What if you're just not cut out for this?" I'd rub my temples, stare at the blinking cursor on my screen, and think of my grandmother's words, "Build your own stage." Slowly, cracks of light appeared. A cafe owner I worked with tripled her sales after one campaign and recommended me to her cousin, who ran a boutique clothing line. One small win led to another. Soon, I wasn't just freelancing, I was consulting. Then came the break. I met Clara Bennett, a powerhouse in the marketing world, during a local networking event I almost skipped because I couldn't afford the ticket. Clara was the kind of woman who commanded a room without raising her voice. When I nervously pitched my ideas to her over watered-down cocktails, she didn't brush me off. She listened. 2 weeks later, she called. "I want you on my team, Olivia. You've got grit, and that's rarer than talent." Working with Clara changed everything. She didn't just teach me strategy. She taught me resilience. She showed me how to negotiate without apologizing, how to walk into a boardroom and own the space, how to wear failure like a badge instead of a scar. Under her mentorship, I built a portfolio that spoke louder than any resume. Clients trusted me, doors opened, and for the first time, I felt seen, not as someone's assistant, not as background noise, but as Olivia Parker, strategist, builder, fighter. By the time I launched my own firm, I didn't announce it with fanfare. No flashy LinkedIn posts, no humble brag Instagram captions. I kept my success quiet, almost sacred. To the outside world, even to my old colleagues, I was just gone. But in silence, I grew. One client turned into three into 10. I moved out of my cramped apartment into a modest but sunlit loft that doubled as my office. I hired 2 interns, then a full team. My bank account stopped giving me anxiety, and for the first time, I bought something without checking the price tag first. Every milestone was mine. Earned. Untouched by Richard's hands. And yet, I never forgot. His voice still haunted me sometimes, like a ghost in the back of my mind. The man who told me to be grateful. He had no idea. No one did. Because while he was busy standing on stolen stages, I was quietly building my own empire. The first time I walked into that office, the one Richard used to command like a king, it felt almost surreal. The space was exactly as I remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Manhattan skyline, polished marble floors that echoed under every heel, the faint scent of expensive leather chairs. But something was different. It wasn't his name on the glass door anymore. It was mine. Olivia Parker, founder and CEO. I ran my fingers along the edge of the desk, the same one I used to stand before while Richard picked apart my work or, worse, took it as his own. Back then, my palms would sweat, my chest would tighten.
Now?
My breathing was steady, my smile unshaken. Word spread quickly through the industry. People whispered about the woman who bought out Hale and Company's downtown office after the company downsized. But Richard hadn't reached out. Not until that phone call. And then, a week later, he walked in. I heard his voice before I saw him. Smooth, confident, just as smug as it had always been. Well, Olivia Parker, you've certainly moved up in the world. I looked up from my desk, meeting his eyes. For a second, the past flashed back. The conference room betrayal, the smirk, the rain-soaked night, I left it all behind. But this time, the weight wasn't on my shoulders. It was on his. "Richard," I said evenly, leaning back in my chair. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" He chuckled, though it sounded thinner than I remembered. His once perfect suit was a little wrinkled, his hairline receding faster than his charm. Time hadn't been kind. "I hear you've acquired some interesting real estate," he said, gesturing around the office. "This used to be my space, you know." "No," I corrected softly. "It was never yours. You just borrowed it until the world caught on." His jaw tightened. He shifted his weight, pretending confidence, but I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. "I won't waste your time," he said finally, lowering his voice. "I need help. My new venture, well, it isn't going as planned. Investors are pulling out. Clients are hard to keep. You know how the market is. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. I didn't offer him the comfort of a nod. And, he continued, swallowing his pride like a bitter pill, you have a reputation now. People respect you. They trust you. If you were to, say, partner with me, it could be mutually beneficial. For a moment, the room fell silent. The hum of the city outside filled the space between us. I let him feel the weight of it. The reversal, the irony. The man who once told me to be grateful was now standing in my office, asking for a lifeline. I rose from my chair, smoothing the silk of my blouse as I walked around the desk. My heels clicked against the marble, sharp, deliberate, powerful. I stopped just a breath away from him, close enough for him to see the steadiness in my eyes. Richard, I said softly, do you remember the day you stole my work in that boardroom? Do you remember telling me I should be grateful? His lips parted, but no words came. His confidence cracked, just for a moment. I built this from nothing, I continued, gesturing around us. Every client, every deal, every sleepless night, it was mine. No shortcuts. No stolen credit. Just me. And now, I smiled, letting the silence sharpen. Now you're standing in my office, asking me for help. He blinked, the reality settling into his bones. Disbelief.
Shame.
A flicker of envy. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth spoke for itself. Richard Hale, once untouchable, was now the one out of options. And me, the girl he had silenced, was the one holding all the cards. Richard stood frozen in my office, his silence heavier than any apology he could have given. For the first time, I saw him not as the giant who once towered over my career, but as a man reduced, cornered, desperate. I let the pause linger before speaking. You want my help? I asked, my voice calm but sharp. Then you're going to hear my terms. He shifted, clearly uncomfortable. Olivia, let's be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I cut in. For years, you built your success on people like me. On taking credit, on silencing voices you thought were too small to matter. If you want me involved now, it won't be on your terms. It will be on mine. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. What exactly are you asking for? I stepped closer, holding his gaze. First, you acknowledge what you did. Not just to me, but to every young associate you dismissed, every idea you stole. You reach out to them. You make it right. His eyes darted away. That was a long time ago. Some scars last a long time too, I said, my tone steady. Second, you don't get to run things anymore. If I agree to partner, your name is nowhere near the front. You'll work under me. You'll answer to me. Every deal, every decision signed off by me. No exceptions. Richard's jaw tightened. Pride was his armor, and I could see every crack forming. And third, I let my words hang, watching him brace himself. You stop treating people as stepping stones. You mentor instead of manipulate. You build instead of steal. You practice the humility you never had when you sat behind this desk. He stared at me like I had spoken another language. I almost laughed at the absurdity. The man who once taught me the word grateful now struggling to spell out accountability. You're asking me to kneel, he said finally, bitterness dripping from his tone. I shook my head.
No, Richard.
I'm asking you to grow. There's a difference. The air between us shifted. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as though the weight of what I demanded was too heavy for his pride to carry. I didn't press further. I didn't beg for compliance. I had already won. Whether he accepted my terms or not didn't change the fact that he was standing in my office, under my nameplate, asking for my help. But I had given him a choice. And that was more mercy than he had ever given me. I walked back behind my desk, settling into my chair with the ease of someone who no longer feared losing her seat. You think about it, I said, dismissing him with a nod. Decide if your ego is worth more than your future. Richard's face hardened, but he didn't argue. He only turned and walked out, shoulders hunched ever so slightly. For the first time, he looked small in that grand office. And me? I felt taller than ever. Days turned into weeks, and word reached me through quiet channels. Richard had taken my terms seriously. He had begun reaching out to former associates, some surprised, some skeptical. For a man like him, even picking up the phone to admit he had wronged someone was a revolution. Did I believe he had changed overnight?
No.
But change never starts overnight. It starts in small, uncomfortable steps. And if nothing else, I had forced him to take the first one. As for me, I finally had the space to breathe. One evening, long after my team had left, I sat alone in the office. The city glowed outside, New York at its most alive, lights blinking like tiny promises across the skyline. I opened the drawer of my desk, and there it was, the worn letter from my grandmother. The one that had carried me through rain-soaked nights and rejection-filled mornings. When the world silences you, don't beg for a microphone. Build your own stage. I traced the fading ink with my finger, a lump forming in my throat. I thought of that younger version of me, trembling in conference rooms, walking home in soaked shoes, convincing herself she didn't matter. If only she could see me now. Not just the office, the title, the success, but the woman I had become. A woman who learned to rise without permission, to fight without losing compassion, to build without stealing. Sometimes, justice doesn't come in grand courtroom scenes or dramatic apologies. Sometimes, it comes quietly, in the form of sitting in a chair that was once denied to you, of sipping cold coffee at a desk once used to diminish you, of knowing you didn't just survive, you thrived. I closed the letter gently and placed it back in the drawer, my chest steady, my heart light. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation, about standing in a place that once made me feel small and realizing it could never do that again. I rose from my chair and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had tested me, broken me, and finally built me back stronger. My reflection stared back in the glass, calm, unshaken, undeniable. And in that still moment, I whispered the truth, one last line that was mine to claim. My boss once took my credit, but now I own the very office where he stole it.